Welcome back to the X podcast. We are at the Carlson table, and I am with Coach Brown.
You know, most people will probably have no idea, especially if they join in recently, like what in the world table you're talking about.
Oh, that's why it's very important to binge episodes if you have been neglectful in this podcast season.
Tucker
this
Carlson
weekend,
table.
Yes. Yeah. There's a revelation behind that. You need to dig some to find that back a few episodes back. Janice sat here. Was it last week?
Yeah.
Y'all had some fun conversations. You've been talking about the mark and his beast and his number.
Yep.
On Sundays.
The mark and his beast and his number. I think it's the other way around. I think it's the beast and his mark and the number.
Mm-hmm. And dragons, not dragons.
Okay.
Oh, I heard.
Yeah. He found 5 nerds who said, yes, we love dragons. They're real. 5.
Well, there's a lot more than 5
No,
nerds.
there are 5 nerds that came to you.
Okay, well,
and,
if you are
and
listening
hugged you and then said, let's play
you-
Dungeons and Dragons together.
Okay.
I actually, I didn't listen to this one yet, but I actually am surprised that you would be so closed off to the idea of dragons. You're not?
I'm not.
Okay.
As soon as we get fossil record of them. It was more in context.
Oh, okay.
It was more in
It
context of what we were talking about being the Leviathan and Behemoth. And we were talking about the
Every
kind of what's
tribe since
considered
the beginning
chaos
has
beast
had pictures and drawings of dragons.
and
yeah.
Pretty universal.
Yeah.
The lingua franca, as you would call it.
Pre-universal. What's
It's
that?
pretty universal.
Oh,
pretty
oh,
universal.
Yes.
Yeah.
But anyways,
Really large alligators that breathe fire.
hey, there are some
Reptiles.
dinosaurs that they feel like might have breathed fire.
Breathe fire.
Yeah.
You know?
I don't think any scientists have ever said that, but go ahead.
That's
don't
not
think
true.
Yeah. Okay. You
Fight.
show it to me later.
Yeah,
I've not seen any scientists ever talk about
Well, I think
dinosaurs
they're
that breathe fire ever.
Okay, well, I did not know you knew every scientist.
Yes.
Number one.
By
Number
name. We're good friends.
Two. Number 2.
Okay,
This
I'm
one's
gonna
be
do a search
fun.
right now.
I came back.
I'm gonna
and
say-
we got our boxing gloves on. You ready?
This is what we'll do. We'll Google it. Do scientists
Okay, well, this is not
think-
just one scientist.
No, all of them.
Oh,
do
all
all
of them.
scientists
Scientists think.
think
To our poor listeners.
dinosaurs.
One thing about dinosaurs, though,
Breathe.
this is a fascinating thing.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be cool if they did.
We
huh?
like have all these, there's all these TV shows like what if the T-Rex battled the megalodon or whatever it is, and I watched those growing up, like, and they have all these depictions of what dinosaurs would look like.
What do you have?
How do you know? Like, how do we know what dinosaurs actually look like? You ever thought about that?
Well, they just found a complete skeleton
Yeah.
of a dinosaur. Was it
Well,
last week?
that's fine. We can know what the inside of them looks like, but like, how do you know like what color they were, or like
They were blue.
Yeah, everybody knows that.
No, they were not blue. Stop it.
Well, I think they connect it to reptiles
Y- y-
just because of the age of reptilian creatures.
Huh,
so-
so interesting.
You
Is
know
this
what's
what-
funny? The very first thing I pulled up brought speculation that human encounters with these animals had inspired dragon legends naturally followed in young Earth creation literature, now routinely portrays dinosaurs as fire breathers.
First thing that I saw is hadrosaurs were once hypothesized to breathe fire from their mouths, and then Isaac's 2010 hypothesized that dinosaurs possessed a chunk of cartilage that extended beyond the bony snout, as in mammals, and may have housed a mixing region for chemicals and oxygen used for combustion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything
Huh,
everything I'm seeing says that it is tied to young Earth creation theories.
There you go.
I'm just saying everything I'm seeing about the scientific evidence could breathe fire.
You don't believe the Earth's only 6,000 years old?
I didn't say that. But I don't. So
Um,
anyways, let's move on.
also, like how they sound. Like, I mean, come on, how do we know, like?
Was that a good dinosaur? Was that a T-Rex?
Please do that again.
No.
Please do that again.
One time.
No.
You're thinking Jurassic Park.
I'm
I
thinking
was.
about
No, we
Velociraptor.
don't. Okay. We need to move on. We just lost everybody.
Okay. Anyways,
dinosaurs.
so how have y'all been?
Barbecue.
You're
Great.
nicely dressed.
Thank you.
Rex.
I try.
Did you say Tyrannosaurus Rex?
No, this. It looked like barbecuous Rex. Like it was like a joke, like barbecuous Rex.
Barbecue is right.
Yeah. Anyways, okay.
Been great. Living the dream.
What is the dream? Tell us.
4 kids.
That's the dream.
Single home. Just doing the things. Working. Doing what I love. It's the dream.
There you go.
Boom. That's the dream.
All right, there you go.
Yep. What about you?
Living in the
Well,
reality that
if that's
LeBron
the
James is a
dream,
goat.
then I guess my
You're not
life's
doing
the
well.
nightmare
No,
by definition.
stop
You are
it.
the exact
I
opposite.
know,
You're the
man.
antithesis.
I know.
That's my dream.
I've
You
not
can have
lived
a
up to the dream.
You can have a different dream.
I'm in the gutter.
He is.
You have
He
a
just
dream.
went on his dream.
I know. Dream travel.
Dream travel trip.
Yep.
Yeah, maybe we'll talk
We're
about
gonna
I
that.
did
talk
just
about
get
that.
back.
We'll talk about that soon,
Yeah,
right?
well,
You had a thought and an idea. We'll hit that.
Yeah.
One of these
Yeah.
future podcasts real soon.
Yeah.
We'll hit Switzerland, France,
Mm-hmm.
everything in between.
There's not much between Switzerland and France.
There's waterfalls and
border- they
mountains,
border
and
each
a lot
other.
of culture
Or
and
they
a lot of
border.
history.
They're like border each other.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Did you not?
There's so
know
much in between joint and marrow. Soul and spirit.
This
Okay.
is, this is a,
All right.
we're off to a good start.
Anyway, speaking of colleges,
You have the worst segues ever. I love it.
one of the things that
Ooh.
you've been thinking about lately
Me
is
going back
your
to
past
college.
experience.
Oh.
Yeah.
From the 40s to now, things have drastically shifted,
Oh,
and we want to dive into it. So, help us, researcher Randy, talk through that.
Okay. Well, I think what you're trying to
Yeah,
segue,
not well.
what you're trying to segue into is the fact that it's kind of been what's dominating the news cycle right now is that there's all these campus protests happening, and it's all over. So it's not just like located in one region. I think one of the main ones that started was at the University of Columbia, and now
That was the one that Russ went to. He participated in the one at Columbia. That's what he's saying.
Did I?
Yeah.
Oh,
there you go.
interesting.
Well, but now it's spread all throughout, and I just saw some stat that like it's now like the most Google searched thing right now in terms of the news cycle and the news media, overtaking the Trump hush money case and all the different things.
Is there
like
a
And
trial- is there-
dinosaurs breathing fire.
that. That's
It's
what-
overtaken
Is there a
that.
trial going on?
There is a trial going on.
You'd never know it.
That is a thing. And so I think we wanted to do a deep dive into all things campus protests and
I
what's
don't know
going
about
on.
a deep dive.
So just give me your reaction.
So my reaction. Well, I've read a variety of articles, so I'm conflicted on a lot of things. Like, I think when there are people, again, we live in a country where we have the right to our free speech to protest, to organize peacefully and protest. So if people want to protest, again, part of me, my first reaction was, wait, we have college students all over our country that are protesting what's going on in Gaza. Like, what do they think is going to happen? Like, what are they going to do? You know what I mean? Like, how are you going to change anything? I don't think they are going to change anything. That's my, just because it feels like there's a disconnect a little bit. But one of the things that I think I see, especially in the younger generation, is it's the younger generation, and I think this could be a good quality, is that there's a sense that there's more of like an outrage over injustice in our world.
Yeah.
I think if you strip away political sides and all this good stuff, you can see kind of that the younger generation is, I think we're more connected than ever digitally.
Yeah.
So I think the world is smaller than ever. And even we're talking about nations and places that 99% of probably, I won't go that high, very, very high percentage of the protesters have never been.
Or probably
may
never will.
go.
Yeah.
Maybe never honestly cared about. Like, I never knew there was this much passion and support for Gaza or for Palestinians in America. I don't know that there was 5 years ago. There is today because of what rules the headlines and because it's just, this is the world, the media. And so we're in a young, enraged culture that is looking for something to, I don't know, to rail against or to protest against. Now, I'm not speaking to the merits of what's going on in Israel and Gaza. Let's remove that from the conversation. We've talked about it before. We've kind of expressed our hearts on that matter to an extent. And so when I initially see it, I'm like, what do you hope to accomplish protesting your university in California or in Ohio? Like, what? Stop supporting Israel. I didn't know Ohio State University was supporting Israel.
Well, to be clear, let's get clear on that point. They're trying to protest to encourage their universities to divest
yes
from Israeli either money or companies who are investing in
Right.
Israeli companies, or Israel's purchasing things from said companies or whatever.
Yeah.
So
trying to put pressure on them. And this is to me, and I say kind of an unorganized, organized version of cancel culture. Right? It's leveraging protests so that we can get universities, that's the only thing we can do, to cancel Israel financially and affect them.
They would probably,
Right? I mean, I think I'm generalizing, but I'm just kind of say what is happening here. I think some of the response of some of the college campuses, I think, has been probably just as off-putting to me than some of these protests. The fact that there are some universities, I believe like Columbia University initially, that refused to basically control the environments, protect Israeli students that were going there, and this has happened across multiple campuses. This is just wrong. They have refused to arrest them. So even when they have finally gone in to say, because it is dangerous, the riot-type environments, to get rid of them, they would, at certain universities, arrest them, detain them for a night, and then let them go.
Yeah.
Guess where they're going?
Right
back to it.
Yeah.
There are other universities, I believe here at Ohio State University, where they arrested some 30-some kids, I think, one night that were doing it. They were all getting arraigned. To me, if you're going to get to a point where you are no longer listening to the law, your protest has not become peaceful, or it's become where you see in certain places where they're now taking possession of buildings, they're threatening people, they're, all things like this. I have not very much sympathy for protesters who get to that point. And then after a while, when this goes on and on for a long time, I go, man, do you guys not have class or jobs? Like, how do you do this?
Yeah.
Like, does that sound bad?
Are they all students?
Like, okay, but you don't have class to go to, and you don't, like, I mean,
there
I guess
are
Columbia, you
reports
canceled.
There are reports that these...
A lot of them aren't students?
Well, not just that they aren't students,
a
but
lot
they've
of
been prepped for this for a while. And the activist groups have been, like, planning and infiltrating this.
Would not surprise me.
There's a
All
lot
those
of...
things.
Those are probably my initial reactions.
One nuance, I think, I agree with you in terms of their goal, but and you may have said this or not, but just so we are clear, I think they're protesting Israel's specific actions that they have taken since October 7th and the severity of the Israeli response. Right. And that's what's prompting the outrage.
Sure.
I just want to make sure that was clear.
Yeah. No, we didn't say that, but yes, that is ideally, I guess, why they're doing it is to support. Again, it's just amazing to see how many people who are, and I think this is the problem I was saying earlier. I think that I don't know why we live in a world where you can't be for a group of people that are maybe being, I want to say, attacked, oppressed, however you want to say, the people in Gaza.
Yeah.
But you also have to be against a nationality or a type of people. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's not like, hey, I can not like what's going on in this situation. I think about all the civilians, the women, the children, the people that have been killed, and just think this is awful. We want there to be peace, all this stuff. But at the same time, what has risen out of this has been a massive anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
And it's a shame that you can't seem to, like, support one without hating another.
Yeah.
And that's what's, I think, kind of fostered and fed into what is, I think, a really awful thing happening in our country in regards to anti-Semitism.
It's crazy how, like, I think one of my first reactions is how widespread it is and how quickly, like, it seems like there's copycat protests happening everywhere. Like, what was, an isolated incident at one or a couple universities has quickly spread.
Every university now.
That they're all doing it. And I'm just like, where are the Facebook groups? Where are the social media, like places that people are getting up and play, like, to your point, like, where are they planning these things? Like how are these things just coming to be so quickly, and how are they I don't know, organizing that way?
I also do think we live in the era of rapid expansion of any justice movement. I mean, you liken it to cancel culture, which I get. I think of it more like this is the era of Black Lives Matter. This is the era of, if somebody feels like there's a just movement, it's just going to spread and it's going to go viral. And I kind of like feel like when I was thinking about it, it's almost like three things that push together in my mind that I try to hold in balance. Because I agree with you, but I think like not to even play devil's advocate, but I always try to remember if my first response is to get annoyed at the excesses. I always try to remember, okay, in situations like this, what's the good? Well, the good is we do live in the kind of nation. We should acknowledge that where it's not illegal to raise your voice.
Right.
It's not illegal to protest, and this has been likened a lot to Vietnam. That there were campuses all over that were protesting Vietnam, and no matter what the injustice is, it does seem to be on trend. There's a group of young people that are at the forefront of that, and there is a zeal in youth.
Yeah.
It sometimes is very misguided, but there is a zeal that seems to come in youth that seems to spread en masse to raise their voice against what they seem to be unjust. And so, like, I don't want to be quick to, like, condemn that. Like, I want to celebrate that we are in a nation where that can happen. I think where it gets tricky, number one, is where people go beyond. Like, I was listening to a reporter talk about, they were comparing this, okay, where is, like, civil liberty come and where is problematic law-breaking come? And you're talking about like, well, in the civil rights era, what you had is people who were defying unjust laws but accepting the consequences. Now what you have in many of these campuses is students that are defying just laws and don't want to accept the consequences.
Yeah.
In other words, to exercise their right, they're going so far they're violating other students' rights to actually be able to go to class, to be safe, to feel safe, to have graduations. And then when they're arrested, they'll go nuts or hide their faces or pretend like this isn't okay. And so you have this like thing where I want to acknowledge the fact that I don't want to just condemn people exercising their right, but then the way it's done is unjust and wrong. And the moment you're destroying property or you're violating other people or you're being prejudiced against others or you're being hateful, you've crossed a line. And then I know we're not going to go into it deeply because we've already talked about this, but the other thing that does filter into it that I can't ever escape on a personal feeling is this situation of Israel and Hamas is just more, and Palestine is just more complex. And I stayed with a couple in Atlanta before I moved to Switzerland, and the husband's from Scotland. And is part of a very liberal organization. She was asking, kind of put me on the spot. I was like, what do you think about all this? I was like, well, I said, just like a lot of things, both extremes annoy me. And there's in my mind, no doubt that the Israeli response has become egregious and the whole situation's catastrophic. But because the Palestinian cause is so on trend, anytime something is so on trend, it just makes me want to put asterisks to it. And so to go back, like in any group that is condemning Israel but didn't condemn October 7th, any group that is condemning Israel but also just buying into the genocide narrative or anything else that is not accurate, it's just frustrating. And it just seems like at times maybe good motives mixed with false hysteria.
Yeah.
And create anger and create rage that at times I'm not sure has a great direction to it.
Yeah. No, it's good. Another thing that I think you point out that's interesting is you have this group of people that are kind of raging against what's happening in Israel and Gaza, and it's interesting you point out and that there's like this sense or movement of justice, and that if there's anything that's unjust, we're going to rage against it and all that things. And someone that I follow on social media was posting kind of this dichotomy, and I thought it was fascinating. If, for example, you bring up Black Lives Matter, if, for example, someone or a group of people were to walk onto a college campus wearing white hoods, white skin, and they were to start protesting and doing these things, there would be an avalanche of people moving to eradicate and eliminate these people from the campus and bringing just punishments and doing different things like that because of what they would be maybe supporting or speaking out against when it comes to a group of people who look different than they do.
Yeah.
But here you have and it would be the same people who are on the pro-Palestinian side. Here you
Mhm.
have those people speaking this in such a
Mhm.
way that is against another people group.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is one thing to raise your voice and say we must stop Israel, or even to say we believe that the U.S. government or the college university should divest or stop sending military aid. It is one thing to say that. It is another thing when it turns blatantly anti-Semitic, and it turns and you yourself
Your
start.
chance of from the river to the sea.
Yes.
And all of, like
When you're protesting what you're using in false narrative as a genocide, and you're using genocidal language to do it, and you don't see the irony in that, there's an issue. And I have read a bunch of articles just this past week from student body presidents to students all over the nation who talk about the terror that they feel.
Yeah.
They have lost friendships, and I've all over the country, Jewish students. I mean, even is it Columbia University in New York? It's actually like one of the major places for Jews to come, because apparently I didn't realize this, but like in the Jewish culture, like it's just very normative for people not to go to universities until later in life, because they're used to the way they work, and because there's civil duties to the country. A lot of them it's normal in Jewish life to not go to university until 25 or 26. Which can create, awkwardness. And so Columbia creates this incredible opportunity for Jewish students to come in, and it's one of the main vestiges of Jewish students coming in. And now the number one place they don't even feel safe. They've lost friends, and one of the only good things that's come out of it is all of these Jewish communities have begun to cling together and find new friendship and new community. But it's just sad.
Yeah, it's just. I think the dichotomy there that exists and the duplicity, it's just, it's kind of mind blowing, like in terms of how we approach it. And
yeah, it's anytime you righteous anger can be so good and so deceptive and so destructive. So I feel like the moment you begin to lose yourself in rage, especially when you feel like you're right, it can be incredibly dangerous.
Yeah. I think another interesting just reaction that I have too is just, it's fascinating to me, all these people who are protesting, and okay, not to pick on them, but it's Gen Z, right? Young, a lot of 18 to 24-year-olds. I was just kind of preparing for this and been reading a bunch of stuff, and I came across a study that was really kind of interesting. It was talking about even, because I don't think you can talk about what's happening in Palestine and Israel without context. You kind of are alluding to some context. And I just think it's really easy to forget even some of the greater historical context. We were talking about anti-Semitism that Jews have faced in our nation. And I came across this study that it was really interesting about Gen Zs and millennials, so 18 to 39-year-olds, and the study was basic Holocaust knowledge. And here's just some stats. I'm gonna read from it. This was at the time. This survey was touted as the first 50-state survey of the Holocaust knowledge among millennials and Gen Z. Over 11,000 respondents. Huge study. 1 in 10 respondents did not recall ever having heard the word Holocaust before.
How much was
1
it?
in 10 respondents
Did
not recall the word Holocaust before. 63% of those surveyed did not know that 6 million Jews were murdered in the Holocaust, and that over half of those thought the death toll was fewer than 2 million. There was over 40,000 concentration camps and ghettos established during World War I, but nearly half of the U.S. respondents could not name a single concentration camp that was established.
Dachau, Auschwitz, all things like that.
All those different things like that. A couple of other ones.
Those would be a little hard for people to name.
The Nazi regime targeted Jewish people in particular for annihilation, killed nearly 2 out of 3 European Jews by 1945. And again, I told you, over 11,000 people, 18 to 39. And there's so many different things. 22% of the respondents thought the Holocaust was associated with World War I. 10% were not sure. 5% said the Civil War, and 3% said the Vietnam War.
Okay, I don't mean to sound like an old, scared, angry world is going to hell person, but holy smoke!
Wait, these people all graduated from high school?
18 to 39-year-olds is this.
39-year-olds.
That's
including
My
basically
generation.
your generation.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Barely you,
And so,
Hey,
right?
Hey.
For a little bit more.
Hey.
But I mean,
it's
we're not
sobering.
talking about all 19-year-olds.
So
we're
we
talking
have-
about 36-year-olds too.
So we have these people who are protesting on campuses right now, and we talk about them lacking context in their complaining about Israeli genocide against Hamas, and I'm like, you have to understand Israel's response as a nation through the context of what that people group has gone through over the last 75 years.
Yeah, that's so interesting. That is because when we talked about this before too, but there's several narratives that society seems to view everything through right now, and one of them is oppressor, oppressee, victim, and so Israel, even though it's a tiny spot on the map, because they have the force and the most funding of any country in the world from the U.S., and because Palestinians are looked at as being oppressed, and they have been oppressed, and
Yeah,
they are
I'm not
suffering
absolving
people,
Israel.
it's looked at that way. But yet, in the global history, like you said, if you don't understand, I mean, we don't even have to get biblical and look back thousands of years. The Jewish people have a just long, brutal history. And it is fascinating. We must have gone to very different high schools. I feel like I was on the other extreme. I remember, first of all, I'll be honest, World War II has always fascinated me. I wrote a weird number of, those like mandated essays in school, in middle school and high school. I wrote a weird number of them about World War II, Hitler, the Holocaust. Pearl Harbor comes out with Ben Affleck. Like almost every World War II movie is about that. And then I remember, I probably shouldn't have seen this, but I remember in 5th grade going to D.C. for the first time and being taken to the Holocaust Museum and walking through and seeing all this, and seeing it again when I was in Israel. And like you said, I remember, I may have mentioned this on one of the podcasts, but one of the most fascinating, like, chilling moments for me when I was in Israel was our Jewish tour guide. He basically said, he goes, we know that we have a reputation for striking first and striking hard. And he said something broke in the Jewish psyche after World War II.
Yeah.
He said, and from now until forever, he said, if we even think there's a threat, we will strike first, we will strike fierce, and we do not care what the rest of the world thinks.
Well,
and
I can see that.
well, I mean,
I can see that.
one last stat to back it up, and then I want to hear your reaction. To
They
some of
have
those
to
stats.
They have to kind of respond with force, being surrounded.
Yeah.
they're surrounded.
They're completely surrounded.
Since 1940, the world population has exploded from 2.3 billion to 8 billion people. It's almost 250% increase. Jewish population has decreased from 16.6 million to 15.2 million. That's a negative 8%.
And yet you skipped an important one, unless you're about to read it. But the Palestinian population has increased.
I was not about to read that, but that's crazy.
So this genocidal people, the Jews, who have, however you want to look at the occupation, so like have with them right there, had the Palestinian people increase in population in the 10 years that it's been, in the last 10 years it's been set up like this.
Your reaction to
To
some of the stats and thoughts.
I mean, my reaction is I think a majority of the people would be out protesting if it was 30, I want to say 30, but if it was many, many years or a different era, they'd probably all be out protesting for the Jews.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
I think that there are a lot of people that are looking to take up a cause. I think it's, let me just say this, and I understand a lot in that age group, when you're at college, you're trying to figure it out, and you wonder why it seems like a lot of the protests and stuff, this is just my interpretation of this, is that younger people, 18 to college, I think when you don't yet know your purpose or have a purpose, you look for a cause.
Yep.
And when you can't find your, and so I think when you're young and you're trying to figure out what's my purpose in life, when you don't have that, you don't have direction in that regard, anything that comes along that seems inspiring, that seems moving, that seems like it has purpose, you're going to jump on.
Yeah.
And I imagine that's a little bit what if not a lot of what we have on these college
People want to be called a bigger story.
They want to be, they want it, and I think,
and also in defense of the young people too. I mean, this is a subject for another podcast, but like, it's crazy. I mean, this is the generation that grew up with a cell phone in their hand, and from 12 years old, they've had social media in their pocket and they've been
Yep.
bombarded with images of war,
Mhm.
terror, and
Yeah.
destruction. And
Yeah.
so, like, it's right there in front of their face.
Yeah.
So I understand why there's a sense of
It's interesting, and I know we're gonna probably I think all of this kind of feeds into a couple big things. One, I know we're going to do in a future podcast because we've had conversations about it, but it's so fascinating to me, both, I guess, in the pro and against, how passionate we are as Americans about external affairs.
Yeah.
And I know that's a subject that we're going to talk about, even from a political standpoint of this, about whether or not we should be involved. But it's amazing that you got all these college students, many of them that have probably zero connection to what it is, but are so passionate enough to get arrested and get something on their record, possibly get kicked out of school, maybe not even finish your classes or graduate, affect your future in life over a cause that it's like, are you that passionate about this cause and these people?
Yeah.
It does really show whether it's the dark side of it or the light side of it. It does show a human intrinsic that humans do need a purpose.
Yes.
They do need to be expressing meaning.
Yeah.
And they want to be a part of something. And to be fair, probably in a lot of these major cities where the major universities are, there are a lot of more Palestinians. I mean, in New York, there are a lot of Palestinians.
Yes.
So you have a lot of people that probably do have an even more visceral reaction to this. They got family, friends over there. And I want to be really clear because, I mean, we're talking kind of around this. Like, our hearts break for both sides. And
for sure.
I will say, as somebody who, we've said before, we stand for humanity. I do get a little bit frustrated at the carte blanche that I feel like is given towards Palestine and even Hamas and even Iran, and without any condemnation for what's happened to Israel, without any support for Israel, with even anti-Semitic sentiment at times towards Israel. But having said that, every time I see us trying to convince them not to go into Rafah, or not to bomb, or not to do that, I'm like, come on.
Yeah, Hamas signaled that they were going to accept the terms of a peace treaty or ceasefire that Egypt and Qatar had negotiated, and then before Israel even reviewed it, they're bombing Rafah.
Yeah, it's. I think the challenging part is from the outside looking in of the world. We look at everything like an isolated incident.
Yeah.
So we're going October 7th till now.
Yeah.
This seems unfair. I guarantee you the people of Israel do not look from October 7th to now.
No.
They're following a much longer history
historical
of conflict
perspective
with Gaza and the Strip.
Yeah.
They're looking at Hezbollah. They're looking at things that have gone on and on and on. And I think it's like you said about the psyche of the Jewish people. I think it just got to a point with what happened October 7th. It's almost like that's the straw that broke the camel's back. And so I think when the world looks at from the outside, it goes, this does not look like the response does not equal the first attack. You know what I mean? And it's amazing how much, I talked about this a little bit on last Sunday time. It's amazing how much we clamor for justice. Like, it's a big deal for for us to be, I'm playing devil's advocate, for us to be purely evolutionary machines. As much as we have this moral fight in us for justice, I'm like, where does that come from? Why are we appealing to justice so much? And we do. And I think in regards to the study, the one thing that I have noticed that is fascinating to me about the younger generation, and I have conversations with my kids, I've had conversations and I remember this when I was in Bible school, just this idea that once you're about 90 years past an event, so if you think about World War II and the Holocaust, we're almost there. We're getting really close there, right? From the 30s to now, we're almost at 90 years. We're very close. Not quite, but 80, almost 90 years from when the Holocaust stuff really started, okay? I've heard this kind of rule. I don't know, it's not a hard, fast rule, but once you're about 90 years past a specific event, the credibility of that event begins to decrease steadily. And the primary reason, I think, for that 90 years, and I don't know who came up with it, is the idea is that all the eyewitnesses have died off. This goes back, and it had a lot to do with scriptural integrity, when it comes to the canon, and we're talking about the Bible and, the dating of of books and writings. A lot has to do with that. But I've seen this skepticism. I don't know how else to describe it, but this general skepticism that I don't remember having in my generation at my age. Maybe it's because of the access that this generation has, Gen Z, and somewhat the younger millennial generation. But they've had access to social media, which is a great place for conspiracies to live and thrive, and all kinds of things that it casts a lot of doubt on historical events.
Yeah.
So it's not a surprise to me that as we're 80 plus years from seeing what the Nazis did to the Jews, that you're starting to see people almost come out and not know anything about it, and I guarantee you question it. Wait, there wasn't 6 million, it was only 2 million, right? There wasn't this. And I've seen this play out in other, just I'll say, kind of just interesting events. Like, I've heard my kids at their age, like some of them are convinced that Helen Keller's not real.
We talked about this on the Gen Z podcast last summer.
Yeah, we did.
That she never existed, right?
How do they do that?
Even though at one point I sent them video from YouTube of the one lady who was able to teach her things with her sitting there and holding her hand, letting Helen hold her hand on her face, and how she learned to talk and make sounds and sound out letters. There's huge skepticism that we ever went to the moon. Now, we're not 90 years, but it's not like we only went to the moon once, but it's all staged. 1969. How come we haven't been back since? Well, we did go back since. There were several missions that went to the moon.
Yeah.
Okay, they cost a ton of money. We're dealing with a Cold War. There wasn't a whole lot of value in it at the time. Why did
Yeah.
And so this, like, there's just this general skepticism in the younger generation, and I don't remember feeling that when I was their age of events before me.
No.
Like, I don't remember going, I don't think World War I really,
I don't
think
mean
that really happened that way.
I don't mean this derogatory. I know everybody in their youth has there's like a youthful sense of hubris of like, we're all a little bit more arrogant when we're young.
Yeah.
But I don't remember ever, I don't want to call it arrogance, but I don't remember ever sitting in school with them talking about World War I or World War II and be like, nah, I kind of don't think it was real. Like, I'm like you. I don't think that never happened.
Or the Civil War.
And wouldn't you think that, like, I understand, like, the echo chambers of conspiracy theories, but wouldn't you think the more technological we get, like, the more years go on, the less people would be able to do that because we have all the record?
No, because
like, there's photos and videos of World War II.
People don't believe that anymore.
No. But here's the thing. No. You have to understand how social media works. Like, not just social media, like technology. Like, it highlights. It tends to highlight the extremes because those types of things tend to get the most traffic, most interaction, most engagement in an algorithm-based world. Like, the types of things that people are commenting, and let's just face it, it's conspiracy theories are nothing if not but fun to talk about or to dream about or to think about, and it creates a lot of reaction.
This is going to be the most boring thing I've ever said. I never thought I'd ever say this, but we need to start picking back up a textbook.
It is a fascinating thing because it feels more generational, which means this is not pointed at any one person. It's not pointed at you if you're young. I'm not saying this like somebody who's older going, oh, this generation's messed up. I'm saying that I'm saying it's not their fault. I'm saying it is their reality.
It's their burden.
It's their reality. Something has shifted. Now, you go back generationally and you look and you go, okay, from the 60s and 70s, there started to be this big antitrust for government, big business, anything, right? This has happened through Vietnam and all the protests that were going on. There's like this revolt. My generation, which came after that, really was born into an environment and from parents who were hippies and who protested Vietnam War and things like that. My generation came after them. And what's often said about my generation is that there's a massive distrust of government, big business, whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know then down the line to millennial and Gen Z how much that psyche, if we talk about a psyche of a generation, fed into that, and then you add onto that technology. What's interesting is you think technology would get facts out there better, more widespread. You have more access than ever to fact check, right? You would think that, but now you and I can both do a search real quick on, bless you, dinosaurs that breathe fire, and we can both come up with very different things based on what your search history does and mine.
And also,
Huh?
Well, you just have access to more information too. So back,
And disinformation.
well, think about the 1800s. If you're writing a scientific
That didn't
paper
happen.
in the 1800s, that doesn't happen. Like the only way you're even like learning about something else is if you're like pen writing another colleague or someone like that. And so it's a completely different world with what technology is. But here's my question. I was reading another article, and it was a Holocaust survivor. It's like 93 years old, and the article described her in tears. She's just saying, I just see all of the people that I experienced this with. There's not many of us left. Once that generation passes away, there's a sense of like, she was like, are we going to forget? And beyond just even the Holocaust or what's there, I feel like one thing we know about humanity is that we are a people that revolves around story. And I think that when you look back at the beginning of time, how we mark things, the way we remember things, is the power of things being passed on from generation to generation. And I just wonder if maybe, and it could be because of science and technology, I'm just starting a fascinating book that kind of talks about this generationally. But I just wonder what perhaps we are losing and could lose if we forget these things from our past. I don't want to forget that we actually accomplished something incredible in the 60s and landed on the moon. Like, I don't want that to like, because it represents a possibility for us to achieve something that no one thought was possible. Like, I don't want to, like, there's so many, and we can go moment by moment throughout the past. Like, there's just, how do we not forget these things?
There's an interesting twist kind of in what you're saying, because what immediately floods my mind is God spends the entire Old Testament encouraging the Jewish people not to forget his power, saying these acts have to be passed on from generation to generation. For their faith to be for the future, they got to remember his faithfulness yesterday. The big danger was that they would forget his promises, forget his power. And now it's almost like the big danger is that they forget their pain. That if each generation forgets what they've actually been through, the world will not have a lens to understand this people. It is really interesting.
One of the things, just in reaction to what you said, you said, how do we not forget these things? And I think about human history, and I think progress, and I think we do tend to forget. And I think we will. I mean, do you have a lot of sympathy or remember a lot of the Battle of 1812? Probably not. What I'm saying is the further we get away from these things, the more we do tend to forget them, which is why we have memorials and things like that. I think a deeper question for me is not how do we just not forget them, but how do we make sure we get to a point where we don't believe that they actually happened?
Yeah.
Like, to me, there's a difference in that. Like, there's one thing where I think when you do forget over time a little bit, you do lose the emotion attached to it. You do lose the pain. You do lose, because that stuff motivates us as a culture to move forward. I think that does dissipate the further away you get. The same thing has happened in our country. The same things happened with the attack on Pearl Harbor, right? I mean, for the next 40 years after that happened, I remember 50 years, December 7th was a big day. It's not now. Kind of replaced by 9/11. Right? It's just like every new tragedy creates a new thing that we hold on to. The sad thing for our country that I hope never happens is that 50 years from now, there's another generation that says, nah, Japanese never bombed Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
Because the unfortunate thing is we lose the story and we lose the empathy and the pain of what people went through.
Yeah.
And we forget that.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I think that to me is where I look at things about the moon, and I look at things with Helen Keller as just a small little kind of anecdotal evidence of there's this general skepticism that's not even like that we would forget, but we intentionally forget because we choose not to believe it's real.
No,
that to me is like
that is a dangerous,
scary.
Well, and because
human history.
Yeah, no, it's a really great point about, I mean, everything, but Israel in particular, because if you forget their pain, you'll lose perspective.
Yeah.
And honestly, like nowadays, what we're talking about with people not knowing, about the Holocaust or whatever, that could be negligence. But the truth is, in the Middle East, that same loss of narrative has happened not just by negligence, but by intention. I remember watching 5 years ago interviews with the president of Iran who started saying, yeah, I don't know. I'm still waiting for the evidence of the Holocaust.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's an American reporter like, what are you talking about? Like, there is an intentional narrative pushed on people that
Suppress
hate
it.
Israel
Yes.
to erase their pain so that people will understand the story.
Yeah.
I agree, and that's what I think where we are. I think that's some of what the spark is underneath of the young generation doing this.
Yeah.
Because I think the older generation, when I say older, that is like more keenly aware of what like closer you were to that event, the more visceral and the more real it was. This happened 10 years ago. This happened 30 years ago. This happened whatever. You've seen the effects of it play out globally. You move to 70, 80 years, and you have a generation that's like, not only do they have lost the story, but now questioning that that's even real.
Yeah.
And that's the tragedy, I think, of that. And even that study.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty tragic. I mean, I know it's not reflective of everybody, but a study that kind of highlights that
Sobering.
we're kind of ignorant
Yep.
Yeah,
about what we're mad about.
So everybody's homework this week is go watch Schindler's List.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's
yes.
a pretty brutal movie, but
It
it's
is.
it's true. I remember
Yes.
going to Dachau. I've gone to a couple concentration camps.
Or watch Ungentlemanly
I,
Warfare.
not quite the same,
No.
but there is a. It's hard to explain. I was talking to a friend of ours, Dr. Wes. He called me the other day, and he had gone to Poland and went to Auschwitz. And one of the things that he noticed that I told him, I said, is the same thing I experienced. It's really hard to describe until you are on the grounds and you're walking through the buildings, the bunks in the barracks where people were stacked on top of each other, the gas chambers, and you're going into the gas chambers where so many of them died and all this stuff. There is an eerie spirit. I say spirit. I don't know if it's spiritual, but it feels spiritual when you walk on those grounds. They feel hallowed. Like you're walking on there, and there's like, and when you have experiences like that, and you've been to places like that, and they kind of have museum part stuff where they have like some of the torture stuff and the other ththings that are there, and you can see some of the artifacts. It just becomes more real.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people, young people that don't have. They haven't had those experiences, I understand, in there.
Yeah.
But when you do, that gives you a deeper appreciation for the Jewish people and what they went through.
I'm getting chills because my other memory from that Jewish guide when we were in Israel, and he told us straight up front. I kind of like this because he told us up front. He goes, I'm not a religious person. He said, I'm born in Israel, but I'm not really Jewish by religion or Christian. And so because everywhere we went, he's very honest. He's like, legend has it that this happened here. We know this happened here. But I remember when he took us to the Wailing Wall, which there's a lot to the Wailing Wall and a lot of history and meaning, but really it is the wall that for a lot of Jews represents the grief of the Jewish people. And he told us, he said the most visceral moment of my life, he said, as somebody who was not religious, was not expecting it, he says, I'll never forget the first time I was taken to the Wailing Wall and I put my hands on it, and out of nowhere, I began sobbing. He said, and I sobbed for hours. He said, because I could just somehow, he didn't even have language, spiritual language to articulate it. He said, the grief, the multi-generational grief of the Jewish people came all over me, and I could not stop sobbing.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And I just think people don't understand
Yeah.
the gravity
Yeah.
of this people.
To end on I feel like we've I don't want to say been unnecessarily hard, but to end on a positive note, I was, I think the younger generation has some challenges to overcome, but as someone who gets a chance to connect with and hang out with and kind of gets to have a seat at the table with some of the young people here in our community, I think the tools that can be a hindrance can also be used in a great way, and they're smart, and I think they can figure out the same tools that they're using to activate and do these protests and do all these things. I think those tools can be leveraged and used in positive ways to create change, and I think they can kind of figured out, and some of these lessons can be learned in a
sure.
positive way. And then I've got a friend who is studying at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, and there's protests happening there. And she sent a screenshot of an email of like what was happening in the communication from the school to the students who are protesting. And they did it one day and it was peaceful, but they wanted to kind of continue and set up a camp, kind of what they've been doing. And so the school proactively designated a spot that was out of the way, but a place that was still visible, and said, here's a spot. You can go set up here. You can camp here for as long as you want. Don't come in these areas, but we'll respect your right to protest and do that as long as you're respectful of like our things. And my friend told me that the students responded and they've listened, and it's been very civil and it's been very good. And so that's it's one small example in a lot of places where it's not done well, but I think it is out there.
Yeah.
And there are places where people are doing it properly and respectfully, and
Yeah.
I think there is some hope. I know it's hard to see, but
Yeah.
um,
Well, I think this conversation took a meaningful
Mhm.
turn, and we'll keep walking through this season. You know, the unfortunate thing is everything with Israel and everything in the Middle East is not a new problem, so there's probably not going to be a new solution coming up soon.
Unless Jesus comes back.
Unless Jesus comes back. So on that note, check out the series The End.
yeah,
Tim
yeah.
Moore.
And this is the end.
And our prayers really do go out to
Both sides.
the Israeli people, the Palestinian people, all those
Fathers, mothers who are hurting.
It's
and
mainly civilians that are caught in
Yeah.
the middle of all this,
it's
Yeah.
it's bad.
and it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
So, thank you for joining these conversations. As always, it's our goal is to kind of bring what is happening in the world to this table and have discussion that can hopefully be meaningful and helpful. Let us know how it landed with you. Send us an email. As always, you'll hear all that in the outro. And until next week, we will see you then.
Hey guys, it's Russ. Thanks so much for listening. We really believe if we can get around tables instead of behind screens, if we can talk to each other instead of at each other, we can make the world better. To help us do that, here are a few things you can do to help. First, if you haven't yet, leave a review on Apple or Spotify and hit subscribe on YouTube. This helps more than you know. Also, if you have been impacted by the community out of which this podcast comes, that's X Church. Maybe you're local or you've been touched by the messages and impact across the country, even the world. I want to encourage you to support this work. A powerful life principle is to invest in the people and places that invest in you. And so I want to invite you to do that right now by going to thex.church/give. You can give a one-time small gift, a sacrificial gift, or even become a recurring partner. Together, let's keep elevating the conversation, thinking higher, loving deeper, and making the world better. Cheers.